The Western Desert, North Africa. November 12, 1942, abandoned near a destroyed British supply column, a captured American vehicle sat in the Western Desert of North Africa. Its crew had fled when their position became untenable. Standard Wehrmacht procedure typically dictated either leaving it behind or destroying it. However, the reconnaissance unit's commanding officer had other ideas. "Get our best mechanic," he ordered. "I want to know if this thing is usable." The Afrika Korps mechanics, in the next 30 minutes, would make a discovery that challenged their beliefs about German superiority. The realization wasn't instantaneous. It arrived as a slow, creeping understanding that grew with every step of their inspection. A small placard on the dash identified the vehicle as a Willys MB. The Americans simply called it a Jeep. The first revelation hit when the hood was opened. The engine compartment was immaculate, clearly designed for rapid maintenance by anyone with just basic mechanical knowledge. Color-coded wires, components that were clearly labeled, and accessible parts that could be reached without specialized tools were immediately apparent. In his 2 decades of servicing German military vehicles, the senior mechanic had never encountered such thoughtful engineering focused on field maintenance. Every bolt was standard. Every component appeared identical across all vehicles of its type. It was designed for mass production and easy replacement. The Go Devil engine displaced 134 cubic inches and produced 60 horsepower at 4,000 RPM. This wasn't impressive by German standards, but the underlying engineering philosophy was revolutionary. This engine wasn't built for perfection. It was built to be simple, reliable, and, above all, producible. A mechanic with minimal training could service it using basic tools. No specialty wrenches or complex procedures requiring factory-trained technicians. The Americans, it seemed, had designed this vehicle expecting it would need to be maintained under combat conditions by farm boys and factory workers. A stark contrast in philosophy. By November 1942, the contrast between German and American military vehicle philosophy was stark. America would go on to produce over 640,000 Jeeps during the war. Germany, in comparison, would manage just over 50,000 Kübelwagens. Even more troubling was what this disparity represented. The Jeep embodied American manufacturing thinking at its finest, standardized, simplified, and designed for mass production by semi-skilled workers using interchangeable parts. The officers approached the mechanics as they continued their inspection. "Well, can we use it?" The senior mechanic looked up, choosing his words carefully. "This vehicle is remarkable. It's designed by someone who truly understands field conditions." One officer frowned. "German engineering is the finest in the world." The mechanic didn't argue. He simply gestured toward the 4-wheel drive system. "Look at this transfer case. A single lever engages 4-wheel drive. One lever. Our Kübelwagens require multiple operations, and most of them don't have 4-wheel drive at all. The Wehrmacht's primary light vehicle, the Volkswagen Type 82 Kübelwagen, was in many respects an excellent machine. Ferdinand Porsche had designed it with typical German attention to detail. It was lighter than the Jeep, used less fuel, and its air-cooled engine eliminated the vulnerability of radiators to enemy fire. But it possessed one critical weakness. It was rear-wheel drive only. In the soft sand of North Africa, the mud of Russia, and the mountains of Italy, that limitation proved devastating. The Jeep, conversely, could power all 4 wheels whenever necessary. The system was so simple that even an uneducated soldier could master it in minutes. Durability over efficiency, the mechanics continued their inspection. The suspension utilized simple leaf springs. While crude compared to the Kübelwagen's sophisticated torsion bars, they were infinitely easier to repair in the field. The electrical system was robust, despite being basic. The fuel system could operate on almost any grade of gasoline without modification. Most troubling was the weight distribution. The Jeep weighed approximately 2,450 pounds compared to the Kübelwagen's 1,540, a difference of 910 pounds. German engineers would have seen this excess weight as a flaw, reducing performance and increasing fuel consumption. But the mechanics recognized the logic behind the apparent madness. That extra weight translated directly to durability. The frame was overbuilt, designed to handle punishment that would destroy lighter vehicles. The Americans had prioritized reliability under abuse over optimal efficiency. They had engineered a vehicle to survive, expecting it would be overloaded, misused, and subjected to conditions no engineer would approve of. This was not the American incompetence promised by Wehrmacht training films. This was engineering focused on reality rather than theory. The Afrika Korps' new celebrity, the unit, brought the Jeep back to their forward position. Over the next 3 days, mechanics conducted exhaustive tests. They loaded it beyond its rated capacity. They drove it through soft sand where Kübelwagens struggled. They subjected it to abuse that would have crippled most vehicles. The Jeep absorbed everything. In soft terrain, where rear-wheel drive vehicles often became stuck and required careful driving, the Jeep simply powered through. Its low-range gearing allowed it to crawl over obstacles at walking speed, a capability the Kübelwagens' gearing couldn't match despite its reduction hubs. Word spread through the Afrika Korps. The Americans had a vehicle that outperformed the Wehrmacht's equivalent in almost every meaningful way. Officers and mechanics from other units came to examine it. Their reactions were predictably initial skepticism, followed by grudging respect, and then dismay as the implications became clear. A supply officer, who had worked in German automotive plants before the war, spent an afternoon studying the vehicle. His assessment was blunt. This represents a fundamental difference in approach. We build vehicles to achieve engineering perfection. The Americans build them to be manufactured. In total war, that matters more. He explained to the assembled officers and NCOs what this difference meant. Look at this engine block. It's cast, not machined to fine tolerances. The Americans sacrifice a small amount of performance for massive gains in production speed. They can train a semi-skilled worker to assemble one of these engines in a fraction of the time it takes to build a German engine. Now multiply that across every component. He pointed to the stamped metal body panels. These panels are crude compared to our vehicles, but they can be produced by the thousands in factories that previously made household appliances. The Americans have mobilized their entire economy. Every washing machine plant, every refrigerator factory, every commercial vehicle manufacturer, all converted to military production. We cannot match this capacity. The officers fell silent. He had articulated what many had already begun to suspect. Germany's philosophy, which focused on precision and quality, made sense in peacetime. But in total war, the American approach of adequate products delivered quickly was proving devastatingly effective. A sobering truth. That evening, one mechanic wrote a detailed technical report. He documented every aspect of the Jeep's design, noting both its weaknesses and its strengths. The report made its way up the chain of command, becoming one of thousands of such documents produced by German technical intelligence services. Similar reports were flooding Wehrmacht headquarters from every front. German engineers and mechanics were encountering American equipment and vehicles with increasing frequency, and the assessments were uniformly troubling. The Americans were outproducing Germany by seemingly impossible ratios. In late 1942, Wehrmacht intelligence commissioned a study of Allied vehicle production. The results confirmed their worst fears. American factories were producing military vehicles at a rate of thousands per day. At its peak, Ford's Willow Run plant alone was completing a B-24 Liberator bomber every 63 minutes. American shipyards were launching Liberty ships faster than Germany could sink them. The statistics revealed a sobering truth. America's 1942 military vehicle production exceeded the combined total production of Germany, Italy, and Japan, and production was still ramping up. The captured Jeep became a celebrity in its unit. Soldiers competed for the chance to drive it. Officers used it for forward reconnaissance, trusting its reliability more than their own vehicles. When parts wore out, replacement components were scavenged from other captured Jeeps with disconcerting ease. Everything was interchangeable. By early 1943, the Afrika Korps had captured dozens of Jeeps. Wehrmacht mechanics formed informal networks, sharing maintenance knowledge and secreting away parts. A black market for captured American vehicles and equipment emerged. A working Jeep could command prices far exceeding its theoretical value because everyone recognized its superiority for desert warfare. Then came May 13, 1943, when the Afrika Korps surrendered in Tunisia. Approximately 250,000 German and Italian soldiers became prisoners. Their war was over, but their education in American manufacturing capacity was just beginning. The contrast between German and American capabilities became impossible to ignore during the journey to captivity. American trucks transported prisoners in quantities that would have required horse-drawn wagons in the Wehrmacht. American Liberty ships, typically built in 5 to 6 weeks at peak production in 1943 compared to 8 months initially, carried thousands across the Atlantic. Every aspect of the logistical operation demonstrated an organizational capacity that dwarfed anything Germany had achieved. At the prisoner processing center in Oran, Algeria, captured mechanics watched American motor pool sergeants service a fleet of vehicles with a casual efficiency that would have been impossible in the Wehrmacht. The motor pool contained dozens of jeeps, command cars, and trucks. Young American soldiers, many barely out of their teens, performed maintenance with confidence and speed. Tools were abundant and readily available. Parts were delivered without requisition delays. Crucially, every vehicle used the same basic components, allowing mechanics to service any vehicle without specialized knowledge. The American philosophy of simplicity, one American sergeant, who spoke passable German, noticed a captured mechanic watching. "You a mechanic?" "I was Afrika Korps vehicle maintenance," the sergeant grinned. "Well, no war for you now, but I bet you got questions. Come on, I'll show you around. Not like you can steal anything anymore." What followed was an educational afternoon. The sergeant walked him through the motor pool, explaining American maintenance philosophy with unguarded honesty. "See, the thing is, we design everything so any farm boy can fix it. Most of our guys never saw a vehicle engine before basic training, so we make it simple. Color-coded wires, standard bolts, everything labeled. We got manuals written for 6th grade reading levels. The idea is that if something breaks, anyone can fix it without calling in a specialist." The captured mechanic examined a disassembled Jeep engine. Every component was clearly marked. The maintenance manual contained step-by-step instructions and detailed illustrations that could be followed by someone with minimal mechanical knowledge. "How many of these do you produce?" The sergeant shrugged. "Hell, I don't know exact numbers, but thousands every week, I'd guess. They keep coming off the production lines faster than we can ship them out. We got so many Jeeps that if one breaks down, we usually just grab another one instead of fixing it immediately. Thousands every week." The number seemed impossible, yet the evidence was everywhere. This one small American unit at a forward supply base possessed a motor pool containing more vehicles than entire German divisions had owned. The sergeant continued the tour. Half-track personnel carriers produced in quantities that made German equivalents seem like rarities. Dodge trucks capable of hauling loads that would require 2 German vehicles. Tank transporters that could move armor without wearing out their tracks. The thing is, we learned from the last war. We build everything with common components. A bolt from a Jeep fits a truck, fits a half-track. Same with hydraulic systems, electrical parts, everything. Makes logistics simple. Instead of needing 1,000 different parts, we need maybe a couple hundred, and we produce them by the millions. This was the secret German manufacturing had never fully grasped. Component commonality was not just about production efficiency. It was about creating a logistical ecosystem where any part could be used anywhere, any mechanic could service any vehicle, and the entire system reinforced itself. The triumph of manufacturability. The journey from North Africa to American prison camps continued the education. At every stop, prisoners witnessed American production capacity operating at a scale that defied German preconceptions. The port at Norfolk, Virginia, processed thousands of tons of supplies daily with mechanical efficiency. Cranes unloaded and loaded cargo at speeds that would have required armies of workers in Hamburg. Trains carried prisoners across America in passenger coaches that would have been a luxury in Germany. And everywhere were vehicles. Trucks lined highways in convoys that stretched for miles. Cars filled parking lots outside factories. Military vehicles sat by the thousands in depot yards, awaiting shipment to combat zones. At Camp Hearne, Texas, skilled mechanics volunteered for the motor pool. American camp commanders welcomed their expertise as the war effort demanded every available worker. For the next 2 years, German mechanics worked alongside American soldiers, maintaining the vehicles that kept the camp running. American mechanics approached vehicle maintenance with direct practicality. They weren't engineers striving for perfection. They were problem solvers focused on keeping equipment operational. When something broke, they quickly fixed it with whatever was available. They improvised when parts weren't available. When a vehicle proved unrepairable, they cannibalized it for components and requested a replacement, which arrived within days rather than weeks. The captured mechanics observed American techniques closely. German mechanics were trained to maintain vehicles to factory specifications, requiring proper procedures and specialized tools. American mechanics were trained to keep things running by any means necessary. German methods produced better results under peacetime conditions. In wartime chaos, American methods proved vastly more effective. The motor pool at Camp Hearne processed hundreds of vehicles monthly. Jeeps came in for routine maintenance, received service in hours rather than days, and quickly returned to service. The efficiency stemmed from component interchangeability and parts abundance. When a part was needed, the parts room had dozens in stock. The tool room immediately provided any required tool. When a vehicle was beyond repair, another one took its place. Quantity over quality won. German mechanic befriended an American soldier who had worked for Ford before the war. The American proved knowledgeable about the automotive sector. Before the war, I worked on the assembly line at Willow Run. That's Ford's bomber plant outside Detroit, the biggest factory in the world. We're building B-24 Liberators. Production started in '42, and by the time I got drafted last year, we were completing one bomber every hour. Every single hour, a complete 4-engine heavy bomber rolled off that line. The arithmetic was staggering. Over 700 bombers per month, 24 per day. How is such production possible? Mass production principles. Mr. Ford figured out how to break down complex manufacturing into simple, repeatable steps. You don't need skilled craftsmen if every worker does one simple task repeatedly. A kid fresh off the farm can be trained in a week to install one type of bolt in one location. Do that with 1,000 workers and you get massive output. This was the fundamental difference. German production relied on skilled craftsmen building quality products in moderate quantities. American production relied on semi-skilled workers building adequate products in massive quantities. The American continued. Same thing with Jeeps. Willys Overland makes them and so does Ford. Both plants use identical specifications. Apart from a Willys Jeep fits a Ford Jeep perfectly. They're completely interchangeable. That means if one plant has problems or gets bombed, the other keeps producing. Maintenance is simple because every mechanic learns one vehicle, not dozens of variants. The German mechanic reflected on the Wehrmacht's vehicle inventory. Dozens of different truck types from different manufacturers, each with unique maintenance requirements and parts. Command cars from various sources. Kübelwagens from Volkswagen. Captured vehicles from across Europe, each requiring its own knowledge base and spare parts. German logistics were a nightmare of incompatible systems. American logistics was streamlined through uniformity. The real genius is that we designed for manufacturability from the start. When they put out the requirements for the Jeep back in '40, they gave companies just 75 days to produce a prototype. American Bantam did it in 49 days. Then Ford and Willys refined the design for mass production. Everything had to be simple to manufacture, simple to maintain, and simple to repair. The captured mechanics had examined enough Jeeps to recognize this truth. The vehicle wasn't elegant. German engineers would have designed something more sophisticated, but sophistication impeded mass production, and mass production was winning the war. The inescapable conclusion. By the summer of 1944, prisoners had heard rumors of Operation Overlord, the Allied invasion of Normandy. When news arrived of the landing's success, many felt no surprise. The Allies had the manufacturing capacity to build an invasion fleet that would have taken Germany years to assemble. News filtered into the camps through American radio broadcasts and newspapers. They read accounts of the Normandy beaches where Allied forces had landed thousands of vehicles in the first wave alone. Jeeps, tanks, trucks, amphibious vehicles, all carried across the English Channel in purpose-built landing craft that were themselves manufactured by the thousands. The scale of the operation defied comprehension. 150,000 men in the first wave, 11,000 aircraft, 6,000 ships. Within weeks, millions of Allied soldiers would be fighting in Europe, all supplied by a production base that created equipment faster than the Wehrmacht could destroy it. German prisoners reflected on their pre-war confidence in victory. That confidence had been based on assumptions about German technological superiority. Those assumptions proved incomplete. Germany did have superior engineering in many areas. German aircraft were often more sophisticated. German tanks were better armed and more heavily armored than most American equivalents. German small arms were excellent, but none of that mattered when America could produce 5 tanks for every one Germany built, 10 trucks for every German truck, and 100 jeeps for every Kübelwagen. In the motor pool one afternoon, prisoners watched American soldiers loading jeeps onto transport trucks for shipment to the port. A young private drove each jeep up the loading ramps with casual confidence. Dozens of vehicles were loaded in less than an hour, all bound for Europe to supply new units and replace losses. One German mechanic realized that this single loading operation at one camp in Texas represented more vehicles than his entire division had possessed in North Africa. This scene was being repeated at depots and camps across America every single day. The mathematics became inescapable. Germany had mobilized its economy for total war, stripping civilian production to support military manufacturing. Yet German military vehicle production in 1943 totaled less than 100,000 units of all types. America, while maintaining a thriving civilian economy, produced over 2 million military vehicles the same year. The disparity wasn't just quantitative, it was qualitative. American vehicles were designed for wartime realities: interchangeable parts, ease of maintenance, simple operation, and rugged reliability. German vehicles were engineered to specifications that made sense in peacetime, but proved impractical in sustained combat. The final assessment in November 1944, news reached the camp of a German offensive in the Ardennes. What would become known as the Battle of the Bulge, Hitler's last gamble in the West. The offensive relied heavily on capturing American fuel supplies because Germany no longer had sufficient fuel to sustain armored operations. More troubling were reports of Operation Grief, Otto Skorzeny commando operation using captured American equipment. German soldiers had been equipped with captured jeeps, American uniforms, and fake identification, tasked with infiltrating Allied lines to capture bridges and cause confusion. If even Skorzeny, Hitler's favorite commando who had rescued Mussolini, was reduced to depending on captured American vehicles because German vehicles were insufficient, it revealed everything about the Wehrmacht's material situation. The operation failed. American military police quickly identified the German infiltrators through careful questioning about American procedures and culture. The Ardennes offensive itself ground to a halt, not primarily from American resistance, though that was fierce, but because German forces ran out of fuel. Panzer divisions abandoned their tanks when fuel trucks failed to arrive. Infantry divisions resorted to horse-drawn transport because motorized logistics had collapsed. By January 1945, the German attack had been contained and reversed. Spring of 1945 brought news of Germany's collapse. American and British forces crossed the Rhine and drove deep into Germany from the west. The Red Army closed on Berlin from the east. In the camp motor pool, German mechanics continued their work, maintaining vehicles for an army that had defeated their homeland. They felt no shame, but no satisfaction either. Germany had lost not because its soldiers lacked skill or courage, but because it had challenged powers whose production capacity it could never match. One afternoon in April, an American soldier approached with news. Germany surrendered. War's over in Europe. The mechanics nodded. They had expected this for months. What happens to us now? You'll go home eventually, probably not immediately. Lots of logistics to work out, but you'll go home. One mechanic considered this. Home to a Germany that had been bombed into rubble, its cities destroyed by the same manufacturing might that had produced the Jeep he had examined years ago. The American asked, "You're a smart guy. Did you really think Germany could win?" The mechanic thought carefully about his answer. Before the war, yes. We believed German quality would overcome American quantity. We had seen American products before the war, and many were inferior to German equivalents. We assumed American military equipment would be the same, but it wasn't. No. When we examined that first Jeep in '42, we realized we had made a fundamental error. We had confused peacetime quality with wartime effectiveness. Your Jeep wasn't better engineered than our Kübelwagen in absolute terms. It was better designed for field conditions and mass production. In total war, that proved decisive. The American nodded. Yeah, we build adequate products quickly and in huge quantities. Exactly. They stood in silence for a moment. Two mechanics from opposing sides, united by a shared understanding of what had actually determined the war's outcome. The lessons of Reconstruction. The repatriation process began in late 1945. German prisoners boarded ships for the journey home. One mechanic arrived in Bremen in January 1946, processing through Allied control stations before being released. The city was ruins, rubble stretched in every direction. But amid the destruction, he noticed something: American vehicles everywhere. Jeeps carried Allied officers through the shattered streets. Trucks delivered relief supplies. Motor pools where German civilians worked alongside Allied soldiers. He approached one motor pool, introducing himself to the American captain in command. His English, learned during years of captivity, was serviceable, of the Jeep, emphasizing reliability over unnecessary sophistication. By November 1943, the U.S. Army had acquired enough data on captured Kübelwagens to publish Technical Manual TME 9803, a comprehensive guide to operating and maintaining the German vehicles. This manual was published on D-Day, June 6, 1944, making it possible for American forces landing in France to utilize any Kübelwagen they captured. The Wehrmacht, despite capturing thousands of Jeeps, never published an equivalent manual. They didn't need to. The Jeep's design was intuitive enough for any mechanic to figure it out. This contrast vividly illustrated the fundamental difference in design philosophy. The Kübelwagen's sophisticated systems required a detailed manual translated into English for American mechanics to understand them. The Jeep, conversely, required no manual at all for German mechanics to effectively operate and maintain it. The mathematics of defeat. The reunions of former Afrika Korps members captured in Tunisia began in the 1960s. At one gathering in 1967, an impromptu discussion about the war's vehicles arose. One former mechanic offered his perspective. The Kübelwagen was better engineered in many respects. It was lighter, more fuel-efficient, and its air-cooled engine offered advantages in desert conditions. But the Jeep was better designed for modern war, simpler maintenance, four-wheel drive, common parts, and, most importantly, producible in quantities we could never match. An old officer, who had commanded a reconnaissance unit, nodded. I remember capturing my first Jeep in '41. We thought it was crude compared to our vehicles. It took us months to realize that simplicity was actually elegant efficiency. By '43, every unit wanted captured Jeeps because they simply worked better under combat conditions. Another veteran added, "The worst moment for me was realizing that America was producing more Jeeps in a week than Germany produced Kübelwagens in a year. That's when I knew we would lose, not because of any particular battle, but from simple mathematics. They could replace losses faster than we could inflict them." This consensus emerged from such discussions. German soldiers had tremendous respect for the Kübelwagen as a machine. Still, they recognized that the Jeep and what it symbolized about American production capacity had been decisive. Its impact came not solely through combat effectiveness, but through the disparity it revealed in manufacturing capability between the combatants. Horses versus horsepower. The Wehrmacht's logistical situation was dire throughout the war. By 1943, approximately 80% of German divisions relied on horse-drawn transport. The German army entered World War II with 14,000 horses and would eventually employ 2.75 million horses and mules during the war, with roughly 1.1 million in service at any given time. Over 2 million of these animals died during the conflict. In stark contrast, American divisions were completely motorized. Every American unit relied on trucks, not horses, for logistics. This created operational advantages that Wehrmacht commanders envied. American supply columns could move hundreds of kilometers in a day. German supply columns, limited by a horse's walking speed, averaged perhaps 30 kilometers daily in good conditions. When Wehrmacht generals examined the reasons for their defeat, they consistently pointed to material disparity rather than strategic or tactical failures. German soldiers fought with courage and skill, and German officers made sound tactical decisions, but German industry couldn't produce enough equipment to sustain operations against enemies with overwhelming material superiority. The Jeep became the symbol of this disparity because every German soldier who encountered one understood what it represented. Here was a vehicle, so abundant that Americans treated it as disposable, so reliable that it required minimal maintenance, so simple that any soldier could operate and repair it, so effective that German units preferentially used captured jeeps over their own vehicles whenever possible. The enduring legacy in 1976. The United States Army began replacing the Jeep with the HMMMWV. The Jeep had served for 35 years, an extraordinary lifespan for any military vehicle, with many remaining in service with Allied militaries and reserve units for decades more. That same year, Volkswagen celebrated the 1 millionth VW Golf produced. The Golf, like the Beetle before it, embodied lessons from both German and American approaches. Precision engineering combined with mass production efficiency, the synthesis that had rebuilt Germany. By the 1980s, West Germany was one of the world's leading economies. German automotive companies exported millions of vehicles annually. German manufacturing was synonymous with quality and reliability, a quality now paired with efficient production methods owing much to American influence. The final Afrika Korps reunion took place in 1998. Fewer than 24 veterans attended. During the reunion, a local museum's restored Willys MB Jeep was mentioned, and most wished to visit. They stood around the vehicle, elderly men who had once been young soldiers in Africa, examining it with the eyes of warriors and mechanics who had come to respect it. One veteran reached out to touch the hood, his arthritic fingers tracing the familiar lines. I captured one of these in '42, used it for 3 months before I got wounded at El Alamein. Best vehicle I ever drove. Better than anything we had. Another nodded. I examined one in Tunisia just before we surrendered. Couldn't believe how simple the design was. Realized then that we'd been approaching vehicle design all wrong. Too complicated. Too difficult to produce and maintain. They made over 600,000 of them. A third veteran added, "We made 50,000 Kübelwagens." That ratio told you everything. They stood in silence for a moment. The Jeep, a museum piece now, represented more than a historical artifact to these veterans. It was a symbol of the production capacity that had defeated them, the functional engineering that had proven effective, and the abundance that had overwhelmed scarcity. "We never had vehicles like this," one finally said. "Not in the numbers, not with the reliability, not designed with the same philosophy. We built for perfection. They built for production." The foundation for renewal. This was the lesson Wehrmacht mechanics had absorbed examining captured jeeps in the fields of France, the mountains of Italy, and the deserts of North Africa. It was a lesson that influenced post-war Germany and shaped global development. The Jeep had been more than a vehicle. It had been an education. Wehrmacht mechanics, humbled by defeat, proved to be excellent students. They studied not only how to maintain American equipment, but why that equipment had been designed as it was, and what those design choices revealed about the manufacturing philosophy that won the war. That knowledge, painful in its acquisition, became the foundation for Germany's eventual prosperity and reconstruction. The defeat taught humility. American equipment taught functional engineering. The combination produced a new German philosophy that served the nation far better than pre-war hubris. Pride had told them that quality would triumph over quantity, that German engineering was superior, and that sophistication would overcome simplicity. Reality taught them otherwise. American vehicles were not better engineered than German equivalents in most technical specifications, but they were better designed for modern warfare's realities, maintainable by minimally trained personnel, producible in massive quantities, built with common, interchangeable parts, reliable under abuse. This functionality, multiplied by American manufacturing capacity, created an overwhelming material superiority that no amount of German courage or skill could overcome. The mechanics who worked with both American and German vehicles understood this through direct experience. They had seen both systems operate and knew which approach worked better under combat conditions. That knowledge informed their work rebuilding Germany. When they consulted on processes, they advocated for standardization and simplification. When they designed new products, they prioritized manufacturability and reliability. The engineers who rebuilt German automotive and machinery sectors had observed American manufacturing methods, worked in prison camp motor pools, and studied captured American equipment. They created a hybrid, German precision combined with American production efficiency that proved extraordinarily successful. The Jeep's legacy is that of a teacher of principles that transformed manufacturing. It taught that functional effectiveness matters more than sophisticated design, and that designing for maintenance and manufacture serves better than designing for perfection. The mechanics who admitted they had never had vehicles like the Jeep became architects of renewal. Their humility, born from defeat and educated by observation, served Germany better than the pride that preceded catastrophe.